So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and to be part of this wonderful conglomeration of thought leaders and and practice leaders too. I'm looking forward to this. Place is in some senses obvious. We all have and know places that are important to us. Places we avoid, places that infuriate us, and places we would love to visit. When we think of place, we probably start with specific sites on the Earth's surface with names like Paris, Toledo, Edinburgh, Little Snoring, and specific topographies of landscapes. If we think of Paris, we get a picture of what it looks like: the Eiffel Tower, cafes spelling out onto the street, small hotel rooms with impossible showers. Places have what we call a sense of place, a combination of immediate sensory experience and mediated narratives that give places, even ones we have never visited, a specific kind of presence that might be positive or negative. It distinguishes them from other places. Places are not necessarily the kinds of locations that are named on a map. The chair where I always sit for dinner is a place. My office is a place. Some of the most vibrant examples of what has become known as placemaking happen in the most unlikely places, in shanty towns, inside the caravans of itinerant travelers in Spain, through graffiti on imposing monuments in 1980s Bryant Park, or through acts of gardening on vacant lots on the Lower East Side. What makes place different from mere location is its emotional and sensory resonance. Places are meaningful, and when our relationship to them is working, we care for them. While this provides the beginning of a definition of place, it does not encapsulate quite why place is so important to us. To get at this, we must recognize that we are place-bound and place-making creatures, as Tony just mentioned. We tell our stories through the places we were born, places we grew up and went to school, places we visited, arrived at, and left. We decorate student rooms with posters of our favorite bands, pot plants on windowsills, pore over maps of cities to figure out the right neighborhood to rent or buy property in or to visit. We spray graffiti on walls, or we clean it off. The philosopher Martin Heidegger described our being as being in the world. We're always dwelling. It's impossible to understand being human without thinking about place. But there is more. As well as being a philosopher, Heidegger was also a noted Nazi. His evocation of dwelling in place became by accident or design a part of an ideology that posited an Aryan master race firmly rooted in the deep soils of the Black Forest of Germany. As soon as we start talking about the importance of attachment to place, we simultaneously encounter the problem of the role of place in processes of inclusion and exclusion. When we become attached to place, we often do so at the expense of others who do not belong. So as well as place being fundamental to being human, it's also one of the main things we fight over. One of the main ways we differentiate us from them, something that's certainly happening in this country at the moment, and mine for that matter. It is no surprise, therefore, that place is constantly in the news, whether it's debates about the wisdom or otherwise of Saudi Arabia's plan to build a futuristic 170-kilometer-long city in the desert, the millennia of struggles over who belongs where and why in Israel-Palestine, arguments about gentrification or homelessness in San Francisco, or attempts to remove statues of Confederate soldiers or British slave traders from public space. Place is everywhere. It is precisely because place is central to being human that it's also subject to contestation. As humans, we are attempting to make the blue dot in the endless universe into a good place. Everything we do is just a global version of decorating our student rooms or planting a garden. Everywhere you look, we are involved in placemaking. Nothing could be more important. I'll return to the political dimensions of place and placemaking at the end of my comments. First, however, it's necessary, because I've been asked, to clarify what we are talking about when we talk about place. Place, it's very small, sorry about that. Place is a location that has accumulated particular meanings at both the level of the individual and the social. It's important to note at this point that place is not a scale. It can be thought of as much as a way of thinking or approach to the world as an ontological thing in the world. An old rocking chair by the fireplace can be a favorite place to someone who endows it with meaning, or who associates it with a set of familiar practices. The whole Earth becomes a place when seen from space by a homesick astronaut. Placeness is thus an attribute of things across scales as much as it is a specific kind of thing. In today's theoretical lexicon, places are assemblages. Places are where things, that is objects, but also memories, emotions, smells, scents, gather. This suggests a horizontal action of drawing in things from the outside, a relation between an inside that gathers and an outside from which things are gathered. Places in this sense are open rather than closed. Places both gather and disperse. They collect things from outside and are thus constituted through their relations to the world beyond. But things are also always escaping place. They're therefore in process. They're becoming and dissolving on a daily basis, sometimes becoming more coherent and sometimes less. So what is it that gathers in place? Three sets of things come to mind: materialities, meanings, and practices. And I'll take each in turn. Places have a material presence. Perhaps the first thing we think of when we think of place we have not been to are some of the things that constitute it, as I've mentioned before. New York has the Empire State Building, Paris has the Eiffel Tower, etc. Every place has a material landscape, some remarkable, some less so. Places have more than a material presence than just their landscape. They also have the multitude of things that pass through them. My home as a place has all the stuff of my family's everyday life: books, toys, food, waste, souvenirs, flowers brought for the weekend, then added to the compost. Urban places, connected as they are to the wide world beyond, teeming with things that do not stay long. Things travel, they circulate within and beyond places. And as they do so, they acquire and discard meaning. Things in a place help to make that place what it is, in part because of what they bring from elsewhere. Things have geographies as well as biographies. This is particularly clear in an urban marketplace such as the old Maxwell Street Market in Chicago, for over a century the largest open-air market in North America. Visitors over the years were constantly struck by the assemblage of things that contributed to what was clearly a striking sense of place. Take this example from the Chicago Daily News: shoes, clothing, fish, oranges, kettles, glassware, candy, jewelry, vegetables, crates of live poultry, wraps, pretzels, hot dogs, ice cream cones, beads and beans, hardware and soft drinks, lipsticks and garlic are amassed together in a glorious ensemble of confusion. One possible way of approaching place is to describe its visible material contents, to provide a kind of catalogue or list. There will be some theoretical and poetic merit in such an attempt, if only in revealing the foolhardiness of such a project. At some point, interpretation becomes part of the endeavour. Places are also places because of the meanings we attach to them. Meaning has always been central to the geographical analysis of place. Places are locations with meaning. Things, smells, sound all become part of worlds of meaning as humans attempt to make sense of them. The ways in which this happens are almost infinite. Places are sites where stories gather as well as things. Individual stories, collective stories, official stories, subversive stories. Just such a point has been made by the geographer Patricia Price in her wonderful book Dry Place about the Mexico-US border. Narratives about people's places, she writes, in places, continuously materialize the entity we call place. In its materializations, however, there are conflicts, silences, exclusions. Tales are told and their meanings wobble and shift over time. Multiple claims are made. Some stories are deemed heretical. The resulting dislocations, discontinuities, and disjunctures work to continually destabilize that which appears to be stable, a unitary, univocal place. Place stories are one of the most powerful ways that places can be solidified or diluted. Sometimes the stories are positive, and often they are negative, contributing to both positive and negative senses of place. There are two examples from Maxwell Street. Barkers, spielers, pitchmen, and hucksters shout their wares while radios boom and customers haggle in a dozen languages. Merchandise drapes from awnings, spills over sidewalk stands and creaking push carts, litters the pavement and walks wherever the hawkers elect to take their stand. Everything blends like the dazzling excitement of a merry-go-round. Or, in regards to crime, I personally have witnessed drug deals, prostitution, car theft, and creeps prowling the area daily. I have to buy back my own hubcaps, radio, and accessories 2 or 3 times a year. Can any of you recognize your own hubcaps, by the way? In addition to materials and meanings, places are marked by practice. People in combination with objects are always doing things. To many observers, this has been the most important defining feature of place, a choreography or repertoire of habits and rhythms that makes a place distinctive, what David Seaman called a place ballet. The ways in which a place emerges from practice is never entirely predictable, but does have some measure of orderliness to it. Some practices are timetabled and regular, going to work, the school run, etc. Others are less predictable, the skateboarder, the protester. Some kinds of practice appear to conform to what the geographer Alan Fred called dominant institutional projects, while others directly oppose them. Places then gather materialities, meanings, and practices together. These produce unique assemblages. There are forces that pull them together into tight, bounded knots that produce areal differentiation and the possibility of difference. At the same time, there are forces that work to pull these place knots apart, and this is often what is at stake in the politics of place. With this in mind, I want to conclude with a note or two of the processes that contribute to the making and unmaking of place. Placemaking and territorial stigmatization. Consider, for instance, the well-known Bryant Park in Manhattan, just behind the New York Public Library off Fifth Avenue, often held up as a beacon of what effective placemaking can achieve. While Bryant Park has been associated with the world of drugs and the unhoused, it was transformed in the 1990s into what is now space largely inhabited by people like me, white, well-to-do, etc., enjoying a coffee or an ice cream. Sharon Zukin picked out the transformation of Bryant Park in several of her books, but particularly in Naked City, she reflected on the differential policing practices of the business improvement district privatized security guards. In the evening at Bryant Park, she writes, despite Parks Department rules against consuming alcohol outside the restaurants and refreshment stands, the bid security guards permit men and women waiting for their weekly movie presentation to drink cocktails while they picnic on the grass, an upscale image of leisured consumption. Meanwhile, the police harass men and women drinking beer out of cans hidden in brown bags. Placemaking, it seems, involves more than a transformation of the material landscape. It involves a degree of social engineering. It tends to go hand in hand with the process of gentrification. The provision of coffee and ice cream seems more important than, for instance, harm reduction clinics or homes for the unhoused. The problem with the logic of placemaking is that places are made out of and over places that already exist. For this to happen, a process of unmaking place must occur. Just as placemaking includes making both a material landscape and a sense of place, so unmaking place involves the dereliction and destruction of an already existing built environment and the production of a negative sense of place, one that needs improving. Advocates of placemaking argue for places that are aesthetically pleasing, well serviced by an efficient infrastructure, environmentally sustainable, and socially lively. Most of us, I would guess, want to inhabit such places. I know I do. For placemakers to move in, however, there must be at least a suggestion that the location in question is failing on all these scores. There are two problems with this. The first is that if a place has failed in these ways, it's often because it has been neglected and often deliberately. Whole swathes of cities have been subjected to austerity and disinvestment, as well as malign neglect. It is these processes of material deprivation that lead to places that can be unmade and then made again. Capitalism constantly unmakes places so they can become sites for new rounds of placemaking, processes that bring with them the possibility of profit. It's rarely the inhabitants of the unmade place who benefit from these processes. Placemaking brings with it increases in rent and property values, along with an aesthetic facelift and the provision of coffee stands and a refurnished public park, often complete with benches specifically designed to make it impossible for the unhoused to get a few hours rest. The second problem involves the more subjective notion of sense of place. It's not just the material structure of place that gets undone, so too does its meaning. In many cases, a significant amount of work must go into what geographers Tom Slater and Hamish Kellen call territorial stigmatization. This is the process by which stories and images of disorder are layered onto places inhabited by the most marginalized in society. These stories include everything from aesthetic ugliness to litter, vandalism, graffiti, and criminality. Stories are rarely told in the context of the material neglect and disinvestment or the wider political economic processes. They're stories that insinuate that the cause of the problems are the inhabitants themselves. I spent a decade or so studying the area around the old Maxwell Street Market in Chicago, just to the south and west of the Loop, adjacent to the University of Illinois at Chicago campus. When I first started visiting the area, there were billboards advertising the new University Village. The village, it turns out, was being built entirely over the area where the lively, mostly immigrant-centered market had once been. A market that had been the largest open-air market in North America since its origins in the 1880s, and by many accounts a very distinctive kind of place. Descriptions of the new village had all the hallmarks of placemaking discourse: lively public spaces, varying roof lines, which seems to be an obsession, ground floor retail opportunities, and of course the use of the term village to designate a positive kind of place. A pamphlet mailed to university employees promoted University Village in similar terms. Yesterday's heritage, tomorrow's treasure. Chicago's newest, most convenient, most thoughtfully planned neighborhood, a great life in the city. University Village presents traditional Chicago-style architecture on tree-lined streets. Neat townhome exteriors feature varying roof lines. The site features neighborhood parks and green space corridors. Chicago's next great neighborhood. The marketing of University Village also included occasional references to its past as North America's largest open-air market. A place inhabited by both immigrants, East European, Jewish, Irish, Italian, etc., and African Americans who had moved up from the southern states and invented, among other things, zoot suits and the urban Chicago blues. This is what is being referred to in the phrase yesterday's heritage. Along the remaining couple of blocks of Maxwell Street, you can see a series of facades that were saved from demolition by the activities of marketplace activists and moved to all be on one street, housing restaurants and coffee shops and disguising the parking lot behind. You can also find bronze statues of blues musicians, market stall holders, and packing crates, replicas of what had to be removed to make way for the new place, examples perhaps of creative placemaking. In between the place where actual blues musicians and market stall halt crates could be found, and the one now where bronze replicas can be found, the place was ruthlessly stigmatized by politicians, university administrators, and the press as a site of filth, bad odor, and crime. The creation of a negative sense of place laid the groundwork for new rounds of placemaking. Some of this stigmatization happened through city government planning processes that repeatedly labeled the area as blighted and ripe for demolition and renewal. Process accompanied by deliberate material neglect, with the university and others buying property and then leaving it to be condemned and demolished. A negative sense of place or territorial stigma is a very hard thing to shift. I imagine we can all think of places, often ones we've never been to, that have overwhelmingly negative images. Very often they're areas of cities where poor and marginalized people live. They are places that seem very far from the ideals of placemakers. We started this talk with examples of placemaking, which included graffiti in Bryant Park, a shanty town, a homeless encampment, and a community garden, precisely to divert our attention from the kinds of places we are most often taught to think of as positive, to highlight the role of disorder in producing liveliness. Indeed, the more a place is made to conform to an internationally agreed set of characteristics that make a good place, the more it conforms to profit-friendly senses of order, and the less likely the poor are to live there. Placemaking runs the risk of displacing people who already live in places, removing the very places that give people sustenance from under their feet, and deriving the world of sites of genuine liveliness, replacing them with a simulation of liveliness that's more welcoming to specific groups of people, which generally includes myself. I'm just finishing. The important point here is that placemaking needs to be understood in relation to processes of place erasure and dissolution, and territorial stigmatization. These are two sides of the same coin. Thank you.